Welcome again to another episode of Christian Answers, and we are here again covering the Cosmos series on television, the one that aired a few months back. There were 13 episodes in the Cosmos series, and we have gone through each and every one of them, talking about how they relate to the Christian faith and the different topics that have come up in the course of those different 13 episodes. And today we're in episode 11, episode 12, and we're dealing with the whole subject of climate change, most specifically man-made climate change. And here is another example in the Cosmos series that we see that it's not just a scientific show, it's not just a scientific presentation, it's actually a political statement also. That you can tell that the presenter, Neil deGrasse Tyson, is a left-wing, radical liberal who also has all of the different other causes that are associated with the left wing. And he takes that cause up amongst the many different causes that he has mentioned during the Cosmos series. And this one, he mentions the man-made climate change, global warming, that he wants to correct through the use of big government regulations, big coercive government status solutions, instead of trying to determine, in fact, exactly the cause, and then trying to come up with ways that respect the human individual and freedom of the nations and sovereignty of nations, and also the freedom of each and every individual to decide how they will respond to challenges like climate change. Now we have to first of all determine whether in fact the claims of many people today are founded, and that is what the claims that our CO2 carbon emissions are filling up our atmosphere and causing temperature changes. We ourselves as humans are causing it. That has to be established first of all. Now the problem with that claim is that there are credible, reliable, solid scientists and organizations that dispute the claim that we are causing widespread climate change. There is no denial that we do affect the environment with our living and working and inhabiting the planet Earth. But the question is, are we doing something to the point where we are going to lead to a catastrophic end, possibly the end of the human race, if we don't do something massive on the level of government intervention, international government intervention, large government coercive international laws that take away the freedoms of every individual, supposedly for the good of humanity. That's what Neil deGrasse Tyson and the presenters of Cosmos are basically making the argument for. They're saying that the scientists and the elite need to step forward and stop people and individuals from destroying the planet. Now, we have to go and look at the evidence, we have to go and analyze it, and we also have to listen to other voices that tell a different story. Well, that was not done in the Cosmos series. There was one presentation made, and that was the presentation that essentially Al Gore made a few years ago in his movie, An Unpleasant Truth or Inconvenient Truth. And he tried to get people alarmed by the fact that he presented all of this evidence to say that we are going to destroy the planet and we have to do something big on a massive governmental scale to stop it. That is the same approach that Cosmos takes, Neil deGrasse Tyson takes, in respect to global warming in the modern Cosmos series. And so we have to ask them, why did they not present a healthy debate? Why did they not present a healthy discussion about the evidence for and against man-made global warming. They did not do that. They presented, just as they do in other areas, that this is already a foregone conclusion and that anybody who would disagree with that was not scientific. That is not true. There are, like I said, credible scientists that dispute the fact that man is warming the planet to the point where it will be destroyed. That is the claim of people who, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, claim that unless we do something about it, we are going to destroy the planet. Now, we have to step back from something like the Cosmos series and ask ourselves, are we being presented pure scientific theories? Are we being presented pure scientific facts? Or are we getting an ideology? Are we getting a political philosophy that is creeping into the science that's making us, trying to persuade us to buy into its political philosophy and ideology? And the answer to that is yes, indeed. We are getting it again in this 12th episode of Cosmos. We got it before also in the feminist ideology of some former episodes, where the argument was made that in the scientific community, women have been oppressed and held down. They were not given credit for what they have done in the scientific field, and that this was a grave injustice, and that they were held back, they were blocked, they could not work, and they could not function as scientists, and on and on and on. That is the narrative of feminism as an ideology, as a political philosophy, generally speaking. That everywhere you look, there's oppression, there's injustice, there's suppression, and all of this, it has to be corrected immediately, and that the enemy is men and the oppressive systems such as Christianity and the church, and on and on and on. That's the narrative that the feminist political ideology gives us. Well, we hear that again in the Cosmos presentation by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Not in the episode 12 that we are talking about today with man-made global warming, but we hear those kinds of ideologies coming across as scientific. So that is a very, very big point. That is something we have to point out to everyone, is that when you are hearing something from the Cosmos series, whether it's the old Cosmos series done in the early 80s or the new Cosmos series just this year done, you are getting political ideology as well as science. You're getting a mix of politics and science. Carl Sagan was and is still, through his books, espousing a political philosophy as well as scientific teachings. And so is Neil deGrasse Tyson. And so we have to be aware of that, because if you simply take it all in as science, you are going to be hooked into the political philosophy. You're going to be hooked into the left, liberal, progressive political philosophy, and you're going to think that the science demands that, when in fact it doesn't. We didn't see a discussion in this latest episode of Cosmos on any counter evidence that man is going to destroy the planet with carbon emissions. We didn't hear any of that. Now, there's no denying, like I said before, that man is affecting the environment, but to the degree that we're at the point, a tipping point right now, that if we don't do something in a massive government way, that we are going to destroy our planet, that is the thing that's under dispute. And I think that they could have presented a more balanced treatment on this topic. They could have gotten credible, reputable scientists to come in and look at the data and then discuss the topic in terms of, we are affecting our environment, but we are not affecting it in a catastrophic way, and we don't need to be alarmist about it. We don't need to get people all whipped up to the point where we surrender our sovereignty as nations or surrender our freedoms to centralized, large, massive bureaucratic governments, because that's basically the solution of the statist, progressive liberal, political, ideological exponent. And that is what they are saying. That is what Neil deGrasse Tyson is saying, that we need to force nations, we need to force the smaller nations, we need to force all nations through government coercion, even at the point of military intervention, to follow these so-called environmental protocols that they say if we don't, we're going to destroy the planet very, very soon. Well, there are differences of opinion on that. And there are different approaches to correcting our environmental solutions. We don't have to all of a sudden become alarmists. We don't all of a sudden have to shout fire in a crowded theater and get everybody all whipped up and excited and panicked, and then centralize the regulations in a government structure that basically takes away freedom. We don't have to do that. There are alternatives. And so before we have a knee-jerk reaction to some of the things that are being said out there, we need to study this, and we need to think about it, and we need to have wisdom and not just react in this alarmist way. And so that is something that we have to be careful for when we watch Cosmos series, because the Cosmos series tends to definitely jump on any of the left-wing political ideological bandwagons that are floating around at the time, and then we see that on television and it's presented as science, when in fact there is a debate going on and it's not cut and dry, and the science still is being analyzed. So we need to wait and not just become alarmists. So we're needing to just be cautious. It doesn't mean that we don't need to definitely think about these things, but we need to be aware that there's politics also behind them. It's not just science. There is ideology floating around in the series, and so we need to be aware of it. Well, that's the 12th episode of Cosmos that was presented. And don't go away, we're going to be back to the 13th episode in our review of Cosmos series. Well, we're back with Christian Answers, and we're here on the final episode of the Cosmos series. And we have talked about all of the different episodes that were presented by Neil deGrasse Tyson, the modern version of the Cosmos series. The original version was presented by not Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's the present presenter of Cosmos, but Carl Sagan, who is the original narrator on the Cosmos series. And he was working about 30-some years ago in his presentation. And today we have an updated version. We have a physicist, an astrophysicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he is presenting what he is calling science, but as we've seen before, he's mixing also in the political ideology of the progressivist movement. And so we have to be careful with that. Now, in the last episode, he presents some claims that are or can be taken as direct attacks against Christianity. And one of the things that he says is that for a long time, people on the earth thought they were occupying a privileged position in the cosmos. That is because of the Christian teaching. He doesn't mention this, but this is the background. Christianity teaches that man is made in the image of God, that God created Adam and Eve, and that all people, being from the original created order, are made in the image of God. And so we're special. It says in John 3:16 of the Bible, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." So that is an indication of how special we are. God loves us here on the planet Earth, and we are a privileged planet, and we are a privileged group of creation. We are God's special creation. We are made in his very image. And so, yes, indeed, we are special. Now, the Cosmos series, both the old original series with Carl Sagan and now the new one with Neil deGrasse Tyson, The Cosmos series wants to say, no, that is something that we used to think that we were privileged as a human race. We used to think that we were special, that we were somehow in a special position in the cosmos, our planet. We used to think that it was created by God. They say we used to think that we were special, made in the image of God. But as the Cosmos series tries to present, that people are not special. They're just the product of a natural, blind, purposeless process. And our Earth is not special. It's just one of billions of planets revolving around billions of stars in billions of galaxies all over the cosmos. And so we are simply just one in a billion, and that removes any kind of specialness from or privileged position for the human race. And that's what Cosmos, the series, presents. Well, that cannot be taken in any other way than a direct attack upon the Christian doctrine of the creation in the image of God and God's creation of the planet Earth, because the revelation of God from the Bible is that God created the heavens and the earth, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and then he also created men and women in his image and in his likeness. And so we are special as a planet, and we are special as a race, a human race. And so we're special in those two cases, and we're special in many other ways. So the claim that we're just an ordinary species that was produced by a blind, purposeless, random, in many ways, a natural process that didn't have anything in mind when it was producing, and we happen to be the end product of it. And the claim that the planet Earth is just a product of a universal explosion and a smashing between atoms and energy exploding, and we happen to have found our way around the sun at the right distance, and all these things lead to another, and here we are on the planet Earth. That is what Cosmos wants to present, and that is what is wrong with the presentation, because as Christians we know that we are not the product of a blind, purposeless process of nature that had nothing in mind as it produced. No, we are not that. We are the product of a loving, benevolent, all-powerful God who had something in mind when he created this earth, and he had something in mind when he created men and women on this earth. And he has something in mind for each and every human life. And so we need to be careful that we are not simply just getting the science, we're getting the ideology and the philosophy and a worldview of these men and the movement that is basically essentially atheism. We're getting atheism, and we're being presented atheism in the scientific suit. And so we want to be careful about that, because again, there was a lack of any mention of any alternative discussions going on about these topics. Well, I guess when you have a big production that you are doing and you have millions of dollars thrown at you to do it, and you have a good production studio and you have important and well-known producers, you feel you can do anything you want to do. And that's what this series is all about. It was written by the widow of Carl Sagan, who is an atheist also. It was produced by a producer who did The Family Guy, Seth MacFarlane. He's an atheist. And it was presented by an astrophysicist who is an atheist. And so I guess this team feels that it can do whatever it wants to do with its own show. And that is true in a sense. But it needs to mention the fact that there are credible scientists, there are reputable researchers, there are intellectuals, there are organizations that have entirely different perspectives using and looking at the same evidence. And so science isn't just what Neil deGrasse Tyson says. It isn't just what Carl Sagan said 30 years ago in the original Cosmos series. It is much, much more. There is much more debate. There is much more disagreement. There is much more room for an interpretation of what the data is saying. And so it would be nice if the producers and the presenters of Cosmos would actually open up to the public what science really is, and that is a process of conversations and interactions and debates and gives and take, and show it more than just what is being presented in a one-sided presentation. I think what is shown in Cosmos is done in the public schools in even a greater degree. You have a textbook, for example, you have a textbook presentation of evolution taught in a biology class in high school biology. The textbook presentation of evolution, that is that a little one-celled animal, an organism, one-celled organism, evolved into everything, including mankind and humans, men and women today, by slow, gradual mutations and natural selection. That's the evolution theory, as an unguided, undirected process of nature. That is what is taught. Now, that is a materialistic philosophy that's being taught in the public schools, in the textbooks, and it's an oversimplification of the whole evolution issue. There is a debate at almost every point on all kinds of different issues about evolution. These are usually not presented in the textbook argument for evolution and presented to children in high school. The reason the debates are not presented is because they want to give the impression that evolution is a cut and dried fact. It is not a cut and dried fact. It is something that has grave, grave problems at a number of different points. It has answers, it gives answers to questions that are not solid answers. For example, within the theory of evolution, there is the strange, mysterious, and really puzzling phenomenon of the Cambrian Explosion, and that is that all of a sudden, supposedly 300 to 400 years ago, virtually all of the major body styles of organisms appear quite suddenly in the fossil record without any precursors, without any gradual buildup in the layers and sediments below that level of the Cambrian period. Now, that's strange because under the theory of evolution, everything is evolving gradually, a little by little, and so theoretically, according to Darwin, you would see a massive fossil evidence at every single level of strata that would prove that everything is evolving from everything else in a gradual manner. Well, you don't see that with the Cambrian Explosion, it's called. You see all of a sudden, at a certain during a certain time period, all of the major body styles show up in organisms on the planet Earth, and there's no explanation in the rock underneath them why that happened. That contradicts the Darwinian theory of evolution. It doesn't show what Darwin said should be there. So that's just one of many, many points in the theory that you probably have never heard about. It isn't taught in the schools, and it's being presented like the Cosmos series. Science is being presented as if there were no debate, as if there were no issues, as if there were no controversies being involved, and that is just simply false. It's a lot more complex than is being presented in Cosmos. It's a lot more, there's a lot more debate, there's a lot more disagreement. Everything isn't nailed down like the Cosmos presenter seems to express. And science is a lot more open-ended. Now, that bothers some people. I guess, for example, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he wants to present to children and to people a more unified and more harmonious view of science. He wants to show and try to argue that science produces a single point of view, his point of view, or the dominant scientific point of view. And so he doesn't want to bring in all of the other debates and the internecine arguments that are involved in it. But the reality of science, you won't get from Cosmos, but the reality of science is that a lot of, and even most of the points that he is trying to make in the series, Cosmos, are disputed. And that there are good, solid scientists who are saying things different. And that's the thing about science. And that's why we need to have a more open discussion and a more lively debate on some of the things that he simply presents as settled, cut and dried, no question. There are questions that have to be raised, and there are debates that need to be brought out. And the Cosmos series, unfortunately, does not bring those out. It presents more of the standard textbook case for almost every point that he tries to make. And the textbook case is a simplified version for children in school so that they are not confused by the nuances and the specific issues, and so that they can walk home thinking that they have things figured out, and that they can go and start in their adult lives thinking that science has the answers to things, when in fact, in many cases, science doesn't know any more than it knew 100 years ago. Or to put it differently, science now knows that it doesn't know as much as it thought it knew 100 years ago. And that's the way science always is. It is something that sometimes is disruptive, oftentimes is disruptive, and the people who guard the theories and the ones that they cherish, they oftentimes want to deny that there's any debate or any kind of dispute on anything that they considered holy and sacred to them, and so they will not even mention the questions and the debates that are going on the very points that they are trying to show are valid and true. And that's what we see in the Cosmos series. So we just need to be aware of that. We need to be aware that it's taking place and to look out for it and not be misled into thinking something is true just because it's being presented by a, quote, scientist. Well, I hope that's helped you.